But his greatest gift was was for everybody. You have to always see that Martin was not about just black people. He was about everybody. Because the truth is about everybody. Truth is about everybody. Is that he gave us a means and a method to solve social problems without violence. And to know that becomes the #1 issue of the 21st century, not just the last half of the 20th century. Martin King became a 21st century prophet who did his basic work in the 20th century. Reminds me of some of the great painters and musicians who did their work a long time ago. We just discovered them later on. But Martin took it to the street so that you had to discover it in the 20th century whether you wanted to or not, because you were going to have to live by it in the 21st century. Isn't that an interesting way of seeing such a man and such a concept? Yes? Martin was that 21st century man. You see, Martin taught us very clearly in the streets of the land that the issues of poverty is not lack of resources, but of justice. That the issues of housing is not a lack of materials, but a lack of justice. That racial conflict is not a lack of understanding, but of justice. Martin made very clear that there was no lack of education and no lack of a desire to learn, but a lack of justice. And that you can't have it or can't stop it with a gun in your hand. All right. It's a matter of the heart. Martin taught us and made it very, very clear that all we needed to do was a little justice. It's what every preacher should be preaching. Is that one preacher dared to do it, change the world. Isn't it interesting that of all the preachers we produced in America, black, white, yellow, pink, and polka dot, name it, that color has nothing to do with this, right? Of all the preachers in the world, the only one that ever got a Nobel Peace Prize was from the very bottom of the American ladder. And came out of little churches. But you know what? Education is important. I don't care what color you are, right? Is that Martin King was probably the only PhD in a pulpit in America. Black. In the South. Oh, follow me now. All right? Don't want you to get it wrong, because I want you to get it right. All right? It's because you could go all over the South, black or white, none of them could be even accepted by the best theologians in the country. I had them to tell me from seminaries, white students from Southern Baptist Convention, we know you're right, but if we do what you say and do what we know is right, we won't have a pulpit. So I'd rather eat, in other words, than to live up to my profession and what I know and what I'm worth. Is that everybody was made smaller, belittled, chose to be. You know what evil really is? Evil is not just doing bad. It's when you choose to do wrong. That's what evil is, when you choose to do wrong. When you go against everything that you know is decent and choose to do so. Is that it's interesting, is that because what Martin did was to prove to this nation, America, what it didn't want to admit, that it's a sick society. Sick on racism, central cancer in American life, sick on war, sick on greed, materialism, that it was sick on those basic things, and that Martin created space for truly good people and those who wanted to actually be that. Is that, you see, there was no space for you if you believed in the end of war, because you were considered unpatriotic. There was no space for you if you believed that we should destroy racism. In whole parts of the country, you were a nigger lover. You weren't decent. You were not to be accepted in good white society. And the good old boys didn't like you. The good old boys who were neither. Right? Is that when we looked at it, is that allowed them to speak out on poverty. You couldn't speak out on poverty before Martin King. And Martin was actually murdered talking about poverty. Right? Not racism, poverty. Right? Because of the greed. When you look at it, is that you couldn't talk about peace. Because to talk about peace, we couldn't win the Cold War and talk about peace. These things always interest me, because how Martin dealt with all of them, brought them together, and caused the conscience of America to be reached in spite of it. And that's what we must learn how to do. Martin took us from petty personal concerns to a cosmic social consciousness that made the difference in everything. That was it. In fact, Martin became the conscience of a nation. All he had to do was stand and speak the truth. The truth will do it. Gun can't do it, but the truth can do it. And he stood and became the conscience of America. He acted out a strategy to free this nation. We created the Civil Rights Bill, the Voting Rights Bill. President Johnson said that the Voting Rights Bill was the most important single piece of legislation in our time. It didn't come out of Congress, right? We made Congress deal with it. And that should have told us that we don't have to put up with any evil. We don't have to put up with anything wrong. All we have to do is be willing to work hard and put our lives on the line behind it. If you're not willing to die for what you want, you'll never get it. And it must be understood that, you see, if you're not willing to suffer for what you want, you probably will deserve what you get. Is that the look at it is always so deep. I enjoy it. Right? see, do I look like I do? I do, right? Let me tell you, is that, you live out your life looking for something deep enough and good enough and powerful enough to die for, right? If you got any sense of integrity, you know you're never going to be able to fulfill it in this nation as it now stands. You know that, right? But you have to know it back home. Martin made it so you could take it to the streets and live it out, right? Is that it makes the difference. Let's look at it. Is that that every human, what our condition is on human rights today was declared, set up, and made real by the movement, and continues this to this day. Whatever we are as human rights advocates, whatever we are as truly religious people, regardless of faith, goes back to the civil rights movement. Think about that. That's enough for a monument on the mall. See, even love became believable in America. Think about that. It really wasn't before. Is that because if you can't love everybody, you don't love anybody. See, the movement freed so many people because of that fact. It freed blacks from forms of oppression and suppression, whites from false assumptions, and taking racist hate for granted. See, we took